Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, how are you going to handle, and we passed the education bill yesterday with higher ed and K-12. From earlier discussions and the action by the Senate, it sounds like there'll be one conference committee, so I assume you're going to fold those two bills or that bill into that conference committee. But the structure of the conference committee, how do you envision it working?
Well, Representative Carlson, House File 4099, the vehicle bill I mentioned, is the bill that matches up with the bill the Senate passed yesterday. I don't recall the particular Senate file it is, but those two are the two that are matched up. And so, as you know, any bill that passes one body or the other is eligible for consideration in conference. And my anticipation and understanding then is that the Senate bill that passed yesterday will, of course, match up with the bill that we are putting together today. Other bills like the education bill that we passed off the House floor yesterday, or other bills we passed out of this committee like the bill that has the Health and Human Service bill and Transportation bill in it, having passed the House, or presumably will be passing the House, would then be matched up and added on to that conference committee.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I ask how you'll handle the conference committee. I don't want to mention any wars or overtures or anything like that, but there was a House File 1812 at one time. And the reason I'm asking the question, that was 10 conferees. And the way we handled that then was we had working groups, people that were involved with other articles in that bill that weren't on the conference committee. And they would meet, and some of them took testimony and what have you. We left it up to the working groups to structure how they were going to handle that. And then they made recommendations to the full conference committee. And the reason I mention that, that was, and I'm not talking political party, but that was a more inclusive process by doing that. And that's why I was curious as to how you're going to structure that. And maybe you haven't had those conversations yet with your Senate counterpart, but I would encourage, once you have those 10 conferees appointed from the House and Senate, that you have a discussion of how you can be more inclusive of other members. And I guess I would say both sides of the aisle relative to, the division, finance committees and so on that they would serve on. So there's an opportunity for input beyond the 5 House members that will be conferees. And maybe you've made some decisions already. If you care to share them, fine. If not, that's a suggestion.
Sure. Well, Representative Carlson, first of all, I have to say I'm not as creative and original as you are in coming up with bill numbers like House File 1812. I just kind of pick whatever the number is that I've been given. 4099 happens to be it this year, but 1812 is more memorable, I must say. Of course, the Speaker appoints the conferees. I anticipate there will be 10 conferees. I don't, at this point, know who they all will be, even on our side, much less obviously the Senate side. And I haven't had discussions with Chair Rosen yet, Senator Rosen, as to those other issues that you talked about. I expect it will be in some ways perhaps somewhat similar to the conference committee that we had 2 years ago in 2016, where I chaired the House side and Senator Cohen chaired the Senate side. But no, to a certain extent, it depends, I think, a little bit, too, on what is in the bill. And I haven't really had an opportunity to review what the Senate passed yesterday, how lengthy it all is, how it matches up with us. I certainly want to have an open, inclusive process and anticipate that we will have many, many conference committee meetings where people will have a chance to testify and make their views known. But I haven't had those discussions yet with Senator Rosen.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I wasn't talking about the appointments, the 5.
Okay.
As you point out, that's the Speaker, although the way we operated, the Chair would make recommendations, and most of the time the Speaker would go along with the Chair's recommendations. But what I was talking about beyond the the 5 or the 10 that are there, how we can develop, being that it's one omnibus bill, an inclusive situation. By the way, just to digress a moment, 2 years later, I had another bill, and I selected a vehicle, and I had a meeting with the speaker at the time, and she said, have you selected a vehicle? And I said, yes. And she said, what's the number? And I told her what the number was, and she said, what happened that year? And I said, oh, Grover Cleveland was president, and it was the year of the Great Depression panic or whatever it was. And she kind of quietly said, you don't suppose you could find another vehicle? That was the history teacher in me, that I was selecting some of those numbers. But thank you. Well, we got another social studies teacher on the other side of the aisle. He'd probably do the same thing. Get a memorable number. But thank you. I'll just stop there. I just wanted to encourage inclusion.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, and, good morning to everybody. I'm pretty tired this morning. I'm sure a lot of us are. And, but just because we're talking about the process, Mr. Chair, and I think Representative Carlson is, I think acknowledging that there was a year when the DFL put all the bills together, and I think I was pretty new in my legislative career at that time. I'm sure I didn't have any voice in that, but I think that having been through that experience, all of us kind of are aware that that is not a really very good process. And I just feel like I need to comment that the process we're going through right now, where obviously there's been a decision in the House and in the Senate to have one big bill, is a bad process. And the public is becoming more aware of this. This is a process that cuts out a lot of members, even though Representative Carlson is trying to suggest that there are ways to help make it a little more inclusive. At the end of the day, this is something that narrows down the decision-making to very few people. And what we're talking about now in this session is rolling in most of the budget and a lot of policy. The governor said very clearly that he will not accept bills that have policy in them, controversial policy, I think he said. And he's also laid down a marker, no special session. Now, we all know things can change, but I think the public, I hope, is following this and understanding the problem with this process. Yes, it is probably more efficient. But the trade-off, democracy is kind of an inefficient system, and it's that way for a reason. And the problem with this process is that the decisions at the end of the day get made by very, very few people. So while we're spending a lot of time in this committee, a lot of time yesterday taking testimony, debating about different issues, and, personally as a member, I find all of this very interesting. I like to learn about it. I like to see about it. At the end of the day, I'm not sure what difference it's going to make, because it appears that the governor will veto this bill. So, certainly if there aren't significant changes to it. So I'm feeling a level of frustration, Mr. Chair, possibly because I am tired. And I think when maybe we all get a little bit testier when we're tired. But I just needed to make that comment because I feel a level of frustration about what we're doing in this committee, because at the end of the day, I'm not really sure how many of our, little votes here are going to matter all that much. Thank you.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a reminder that House rules say we're not to refer to the other body or what the governor may or may not do. That's not appropriate.
And let me just say that Representative Liebling, I feel that I'm a reasonably good negotiator, but I don't have confidence that I can get this entire bill exactly as it is in every last respect through the other body. So I imagine there will be some changes in the negotiations that take place, and so the governor is not going to be getting this exact bill. And I certainly am committed to working with the governor and with all parties to try to come up with something that is the best bill possible for the people of Minnesota. In regard to, the one single bill, we've done it this way in the even-numbered years with both parties for quite a few years. I can understand the frustration that some people have with it. I, again, am open to people's thoughts and concerns, and I am going to, I'm sure, be sitting through many, many, many hours and days of testimony on this. And if you have issues, Representative Liebling, that you want to bring forward to me, or anyone wants to bring forward to me as we go into this, I certainly invite you to do that. As to exactly how the rest of the process goes with other working groups and such, again, I haven't had those discussions with Senator Rosen. We'll have to have those discussions and see where things go.